Hi and welcome to the Fancy Comma YouTube. Today I'm joined by D. Walsh. He's the creator of Sergeant Scholar, which is an excellent meme and educational materials website. It's a platform with over 46,000 followers on Facebook. A U.S. Marine Corps veteran and psychomer, Walsh, aka Sergeant Scholar, posts humorous memes about science, pseudoscience, misinformation, and the military. You can find Sergeant Scholar on the web at sgtscholar.wordpress.com or on Facebook search for sgt.scholar or use the links in the description box. Just click on them and you can go visit Sergeant Scholar and lol. Welcome, Sergeant Scholar. It's amazing to have you on our YouTube today. We were just chatting before recording about my friend Jasmine Mobili, who's a Marine veteran in space, and you're a Marine Corps veteran. Have you ever met my friend that she's currently on the International Space Station? She's like one of two females with Laurel O'Hara, who is a not a veteran. She's like a Jayhawk, Kansas Jayhawk. Do you know anything about my friend, or should I? Have you met her? Did you? Because you're a combat veteran of Iraq. She's a combat veteran of Afghanistan. There's no chance you met my astronaut friend, have you?
No. I was an infantryman from 2000 2006. She's a badass pilot. So I have not had the pleasure to meet the lieutenant colonel. So I know that she has flown aircraft, has been a test pilot, but no, I never had a chance to meet her.
Me and Jasmine, NASA astronaut Jasmine Mokbeli and I were both Persian, graduated in 2005, and I attended graduation with her, and we weren't really friends. And then she's I learned that she's going to space. She's joined the Turtles, which is the astronaut class at NASA, and I was like, oh wow, that's so crazy. And so I posted about it on the MIT Class of 2005 Facebook, which I'm a member. I was treasurer of the MIT Class of 2005, but I actually quit because I got too busy, and actually someone else was managing our finances. But anyway, an actual astronaut liked my Facebook post and my classmate, and I wrote her a message on LinkedIn, and I was like, hey, um, we're going to space. That's insane. And she was like, thank you. I don't check LinkedIn often. And I was like, that's so weird. But it was the day after the SpaceX explode, because she traveled on space. She was so for the flight to the space station, she was the person in charge of it, and I actually know her husband as well randomly. So I've been following the news on her like really closely, and she used to be a test pilot in Afghanistan, and she actually joined the Marines just to become an astronaut or something. And actually, she was. I asked my friend, and my friend was like, she was an aero astro major, like Jaws, and I was like, do you remember Jaws? Like she's going to space, and my friend was like, I remember her, but she only hung out with ROTC people. So we MIT has a great tradition of astronauts, and it's amazing to like actually know one, and like we have this astronaut in common because she's an MIT graduate. Like I'm an MIT graduate, she's a Marine, you're a Marine, so we can both be celebrate this and be happy about this because I'm like
Yeah.
a huge space nerd. I never really talk about space because it's weird to be that weird obsessed with space, but it's not weird. It's cool.
No,
Do
as
you
you can
know
see, I'm a little obsessed.
what is that back there? This little thing.
So I have a bunch of stuff. I'm gonna kind of there might be some wobbling around, but I got a bunch of stuff up here. We got a lunar module, uh, the solar system, sans Saturn's rings, which fell off, and up here a bunch of other stuff. And over yonder, you can't see here, but I also have like a globe of Mars and just a bunch of other little space trinkets.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. Space rules. I can't believe we both love space that much. So, what motivated you to start Sergeant Scholar as a veteran scholar of science? And how did you grow to have 46,000 followers? That's amazing.
So in 2016, after I completed my two undergraduate degrees, I just kind of got really interested in how some science communicators were able to present their perspective and connect with audiences. And I was thinking, that's pretty cool. When I started my graduate studies in 2017, I was originally focusing on astrobiological research with a microbiology focus, right? And I just figured, you know what? Let me just do some science communication kind of on the side. And I decided, you know what? Why not use my military background as a way to try and connect with some other audience members, right? Use that same background to kind of just draw them in. And it just kind of grew from there over the years.
I have to mute myself because I sometimes hyperventilate between questions because I find being on a YouTube really scary. Not
It
gonna
is.
lie.
Yeah, put yourself
Uh,
out there. It's a big deal. Yeah.
yeah, and especially you're one of my SciComm idols, Sergeant Scholar, because you are really bold in combating, I guess because you're a combat veteran, combating misinformation and not being afraid to do that because I feel like as someone, I hate conflict. I want everyone to get along. I want us all to agree on everything and for us to be the most science literate people ever. And if there's a conflict, I'm just like, oh, you're right, like whatever. But you're very bold about this posting things, and your posts are like really humorous. And there's you and someone named Isotope that
Mhm.
I don't know who Isotope is, but Isotope rules as well. And as I mentioned, you post a lot about countering scientific misinformation and pseudoscience. Do you get pushback from people, or because it's facts aren't really popular, and it's easy to misinformation to become popular, and there's like tons of examples of that in the pandemic. Do you get pushback, or is it like mostly fun? Like I read your comments and it's like a mix of like veterans, people that like science. Yours, I don't know where you get your memes, but they're truly exceptional. But yeah, what's it like running Sergeant Scholar? Do you get a lot of people complaining, or you just kind of ignore them, or what's that like?
I mean, is it okay if I kind of like do a roundabout way of answering this? Because it seemed like there was a bunch of tangent questions in there.
That's
So
totally fine.
when I began my SciComm experience, I wanted to do it in a way that was pushing back against misinformation and pseudoscience, but in a way that wasn't outcasting. It didn't other people who was empathetic maybe to a misinformed view. All right. So what I tried and did was just use some ways that would connect with audience members, even if they never commented or engaged, but just kind of at least read it and was like, okay, I'll bite. This is kind of funny. What are we talking about? And that became a bit more streamlined after 2019, because that's when I switched from my master's in microbiology to communication. So I switched from hard STEM to the humanities and completed that, and that was able to show what a lot of these theories are in communication and allowed me to ground my ideas like, oh, okay, because like before I was like, I'm just trying to use some common sense and looking at these different papers, like how do I connect with people? And now all of a sudden everything's making a lot more sense. But of course, that was also around the same time in 2020 when the pandemic happened. And in short, yes, lots of pushback. But uh, through those studies and that experience, I was able to streamline the way that I was able to allow that pushback to occur. I was able to, I think, in my view, better navigate how much do I let people like express this pushback for the benefit of other audience members, and at what point do I kind of draw the line and be like, hide this comment or just outright ban them. Sometimes I do get threatened from this stuff. Like it's especially anti-vaxxers, right? During the pandemic, they were like, "No, you are trying to kill people." I'm like, "No, no, this person's just gone, right?" And just maybe use that comment, like a screenshot it, edit out the name, and just use that as an example. Of like, hey, this is an example of what is not healthy dialogue. And here is why they are wrong. And if you had maybe similar questions, this would be a better way to approach your questions. Ask it in this way for us, and we will be more than happy to answer for you. I know that was kind of circuitous, but did that hit your points?
Yeah, it did. And people were very, pandemic science was like very rapidly evolving. Um, it was every day. I honestly felt like it was very stressful every day to, as a scientist, try to keep up with everything. And then, like, um, doing vaccine communications, just science communications. And like, it really felt like our social media posts could help people. And I think they did really help a lot of people. Unfortunately, a lot of people just like did not believe any science, and they like there were a lot of sad stories of people dying being like, I wish I would have listened, I wish I wouldn't have read that misinformation online. And it's just like, I honestly feel like in some ways the science communications that we did in the pandemic was kind of like akin to like a life or death battle. Like, I've never been in a war. um, I actually am afraid of the infantry. Like, I'm just scared of it, and I don't know why. So it's hilarious that I'm interviewing you today because I didn't know you're an infantry. I knew you're a sergeant because you have your logo is like the sergeant chevrons, and then it has the Marines colors, and but it has like a science speaker, but the test tube thingy. Um, so I guess I will just ask you this. Do you think that countering misinformation is like a battle? And I apologize if that is a question that is insensitive, but I really felt on some days when I was doing science communications that I was really just fighting an uphill battle, and that people were actively out to get me, kind of. And like, maybe that wasn't the real reality, but that's how I felt. So since I think about this a lot, I guess I just decided to ask you this question. And if you don't want to answer it, we can just edit this part out.
No, that's fine. It was very much like a battle in many respects. Obviously, not one with bombs, grenades, and bullets, but one with words and ideas and how we perceive our values, even though that we shared many of these same values. It was very much like a battle. Like, are we going to tackle this disease together and overcome it with minimum people getting sick and killed and dealing with long COVID? Or are we just going to let it run rampant, right? And if not either of those, where in that spectrum are we going to land? And how are we going to navigate that? It was very much was a battle in that kind of respect.
That's both like reassuring to hear, because I definitely felt like it was some kind of, it was definitely like a conflict of some kind. But I think like it's, uh, it was, it was definitely very like difficult. And I think a lot of science communicators got really tired of
Mm.
doing this day after day, and then like the burnout that medical professionals faced. I read that when you're doing something and people hate you for it, it's a lot harder to do that thing. So I'm not surprised that so many medical professionals burned out.
Yeah, I had some medical professionals that I know in my personal circles, and yeah, the burnout was real. I mean, I was feeling burnt out just doing the communication end, actually having to intubate people and deal with the 12 plus hour shifts, almost every day of the week. I couldn't imagine.
It's definitely a lot, and I'm glad we're over that part here in the US. I don't know how it's going out elsewhere because I haven't been able to travel, because I just stay in my own little bubble and whatever. So my other question for you that I want to ask you is, as we've talked about, you're also a combat veteran, Marine infantry person. Um, I can feel my fight or flight response like occur like just as I say that, which is like hilarious to me. Um,
You're
how does
doing
that inform? Thank you. How has that informed the way you approach SciComm, or does it, like being a Marine? Um, Does that influence your style of science communication?
In a way, right? So if we, the most obvious way is if we go back to Aristotelian forms of rhetoric, right? Ethos, pathos, logos. That combat veteran aspect is able to allow me to draw on that ethos to reach out to maybe audience members who may not be as receptive to other people who are trying to communicate science with them. So by having at least maybe not the same background, but showing like, hey, I believe in defense, I put myself on the line, at least having those shared values might be able to bring them in. And having personally invested in this nation's defense, I have a view of misinformation that I think is threatening. I view misinformation as a direct threat to our democratic republic because how can we have meaningful conversations of solving the many issues on our national docket if we do not have a shared understanding of the fundamental facts that would eventually lead us to come to some sort of decision?
There are facts, and then there's like how we feel about facts. But then it's like, I feel like in the pandemic there were facts, but it was like hard to find them. So any things you want to shout out? I don't know. I kind of ran out of things to ask you because I feel like this is kind of a heavy conversation because we basically just agreed that cackling misinformation is like a battle, and I don't have any battle training, so I mean, it's a lot. Probably will have to think about that a lot and really. I think a lot of people will agree, though, when they see this video, that it was very hard.
Some additional things. Well, I know that having a STEM background, veteran background, and a uh, professional trained communication background, people sometimes reach out to me like, "Hey, what are some tips for me in my personal life to reach out to other people and discuss science?" And for me, I tell them to try and use some kind of common sense things, right? Don't attack them, right? Try and if you're having a one-on-one conversation, try and find some common ground, reach them in some way. And most importantly, don't set your goal too high. Minds tend to change incrementally, especially on topics that we have already invested ourselves in. So don't expect a huge shift after one conversation. If you just get enough of them to go, huh, you know what? I haven't thought about it that way. I need to think about that. That's a win. All right, that is a win. Take it and let them digest it before even picking up on that next conversation.
That's a really good point because kind of like so it's hard to do science communication. The challenge of science communication is that we all live together on the earth. We try to coexist harmoniously. There's not like a it's not that it's not black and white. There are some gray areas like skepticism about things you don't understand is pretty healthy, and it's part of having a critical thinking mindset and like analytical mindset, which you talk about a lot on Sergeant Scholar, more than I could ever talk about, even as a scientist. Have you ever done science research, Sergeant Scholar?
I did in my first few years in my graduate studies, we were doing some research on uh, Mojave desert dwelling microbes that may have had some analogous properties that would allow them to possibly thrive in a Mars like brine environment in the subsurface, which was very difficult research. But then life events changed and living in lab was no longer conducive with a newborn baby coming and everything. So at that time, I was like, oh well, this communication thing is picking up. I might as well just switch my major over to some communication side. But yes, I have done some scientific research in wet labs, and it is very arduous. Well, you know, on one week you could be thinking you're on the right track, only to hit a roadblock, be like, nope, that's not going to work. Then you have to like backtrack your steps and figure out what is another way to address this research topic. And it's so time consuming. It really is. It's such hard work. Much bad respect to those who are still out there toughing it out in the labs.
I also used to work in lab, and the one thing I didn't like about working in lab is you can't eat in the lab, and I eat a lot. I'm always eating. Um, and one thing I did in the pandemic is just eat. As you can see, I'm actually it's a whole thing. But I just didn't like that I could not eat in the lab. And all my friends were like, oh, just put your coffee outside and then come work with like, diphtheria or whatever. And it's like, I really like sitting at a table and sitting at a desk and having snacks and like just typing. I did a lot of wet lab research. I did like cancer research. I can't remember, Alzheimer's research. Stress really impacts your brain. As I was telling Sergeant Scholar before this call, yesterday I was talking to someone and they were like, your eye is randomly being cross eyed. And so I learned that when I'm stressed out, I get cross eyed. So if you found my cross eyed eye in here, it's due to stress. Yeah, lab culture is tough, and especially trying to do lab stuff that is at the boundaries of the impossible is like impossible. So shout out to our fellow scientists. We talked about a lot in a very short amount of time, and I'm really grateful for you being on the Fancy Comma YouTube because I'm a huge fan of Sergeant Scholar. I love the memes. They're like the perfect blend of like sarcastic science communication, but like educational. They are very, it like talks about like everything I would want to talk about if I was like a science blog. So um,
Thank you.
I love Sergeant Scholar. Everyone should definitely check out Sergeant Scholar. It's in the description box. So um, especially if you like veteran and military memes, there's a lot of that on there, and I think that can be really fun. Thanks for being on our YouTube. Thanks for your service to our nation. You're the best, Sergeant Scholar. Thank you for being on our YouTube.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.